Some people just want peace, and by that I mean a little piece of Poland and a little piece of France, a little piece of Portugal and Austria perchance. This week's topic is expanding the borders of the existing empires, mainly using the 1005 alternate timeline, because the 1010 official timeline destroyed any chance of most of the power players actually getting bigger. Not just the known world, but the Savage Coast and the Red Coast as well. Unfortunately, the Hollow World is restricted by the spell of preservation, so border changes in that area are quite difficult because the Immortals constantly hit the reset button. But enough of that, let's invade people. I'm Mr. Welch, and today we are expanding the empires. Might as well do some rehash to start with Thyatys, since being based partially on Imperial Rome, it is the most empirical of all the empires. In the 1005 timeline, after the war with Alphatia, Thyatys does win some disputed territories on the Isle of Dawn, but that's more of appeasement than anything else. Remember, in that war, Thyatys does prove to be much more competent militarily than Alphatia does, despite their wizards. Thyatys finishes its conquest of the hinterlands, then has the rest of Devania in its reach. Of course, that requires people to actually finish writing Devania, so that's the major drawback with that goal. An easy target for Thyatys would be the Tiger clan's land in Etrugan, as at this point they are without allies and were mauled in multiple battles, primarily by Keramikos, Irendi, and in the end, Ethengar. The Turtle clan, on the other hand, does have multiple allies that would make a Phaeacian assault on them ill-advised. In the 1005 timeline, the Heldonic Knights seized Oslan when their warriors left to sack parts of the Isle of Dawn. Thyatys liberates the nation, but keeps it in the Phaeacian sphere of influence by making it into a puppet state. Flipping to Alphatia, you've got a few options, because in the 1005 timeline, its military is spent thanks to the terrible leadership of Prince Xandar, and in the 1010 timeline, it's just wiped off the face of the map, so it sucks to be Alphatia. If they can finish their conquest of the Genite lands, then they do have a massive advantage there, and that leaves the Scothar lands open for future conquest. But that also means somebody has to finish writing the Scothar continent so we can see what's being conquered. Which reminds me to put my idea for Scothar on the list of topics to be discussed, which is mainly similar to the known world, but using the more successful African nations and empires. Alphatia does have access to the more easily conquered lands to the north as well. Hul is the third empire looking for more land, and in canon from the 1000 timeline it does have the most success. It conquers Sin in both of the 5 and the 10 timelines, which means it has to go through the multiple city-states between Hul and Darakan. There's not much left to expand into the north except for Blasted Wasteland. Into the south it's a few city-states that would fall easily except for Slagovich because of its strategic location. If it wants to expand into the Savage Barony, it has the problem of the Red Curse, obviously. It's hard to keep troops around that would willingly march straight into a curse, but it's not like the Master of Hul really cares for his troops. But the Master could gain the use of numerous humanoid clans that surround the Savage Baronies for additional troops. The cost in lives would be enormous, but the Master might be able to overwhelm the nation with just sheer numbers. Ethengar is seriously expansionistic, but it's hemmed in on almost all sides by nations they can't invade because of the Mystara cartographer's mountain range fetish. As I've mentioned previously in other videos, their only option is north into Windar because Glantry is well defended. You can't invade Alfheim or New Angmar with cavalry because of the dense trees. Darakan is ravaged by war, so there's not much left, and Vestland is mountains, fjords, wooded hills, and trolls. Vestland would be a viable target except for the fjord splitting the nation in half and protecting the southern and more populous half of the nation easily, so north is one of their only options. There's the Heldonic Freeholds as the other option for invasion, which they do in 1010 with disastrous results, but if they're going to do what Mongols do best, they need large open lands to conquer. Those are the major imperial types and their obvious conquests, but there's a lot of other lands ripe for conquest by other nations. There's a lot of smaller nations that are either militarily weak, in a location that's hard to defend, or just incompetently run. This leaves them open for invasion by multiple sources rather than just a single nation. There's also a large amount of uncontested territory waiting for someone to come in and colonize it rather than just send an army to lay claim to unoccupied land. The largest and least defended area in Mystara is the Isle of Dread. It's mineral rich, quite fertile, has a large amount of other natural resources. There's a few hundred islanders living there at best, but their level of technology is far below that of the known world. It's not hard to imagine the Minrathad Guild sending several thousand troops to claim the island as their own, especially since they're the closest nation. But if word gets out to either Thyatys or Alphatia, it would be an even easier conquest than Minrathad's attempt. Of course, there's always a chance a third party could establish their own nation there when playing the module, making the area's future uncertain, but with more options than I can easily list. The Soderford Jarldons are also on the list of nations that can be easily taken because of their fragmented political structure. The Solderfjorders are divided into their individual jarldoms. There's no central king unless they finally agree on one. Without an outside threat, they're only loosely affiliated with each other, and the Jarls will do what's best for them and not their country. So if another nation comes by with a better offer, there's a good chance the Jarldoms could be doomed by somebody simply buying the allegiance of one Jarl after another. Oslan or Thyatis could try this ploy, but Ethengar is devious enough to attempt to acquire Soldefjord as a vassal state if it helps them acquire Vestland. Windar and Dinagoth are the outliers in Mystara. They're isolated and alone with little in the way of trade or alliances. Windar is the smaller of the nation population, but it's further away from the imperial powers. Ethengar would be their biggest threat, but if Hull went in through the northern wastelands, they would have an easier time into Windar with little in the way of natural barriers past the desert. Dinagoth is well defended naturally, but close to Norworld, which means Alphatia would have its eyes on it. Ethengar would have the option to get at Dinagoth by going through passes, and once the Ethengar are on a plateau, they're in their element. Of course, Alphatia would turn it into a curb stomp, because even depleted after 1005, it's still a much more powerful empire than Dinagoth, and more importantly, the Alphatia is looking for an easy win. It's hard to see Dinagoth with no allies and striking distance of Norwald being independent much longer. It would be an easy way for King Erekal to gain major favor with his mother if he brought in new territory to replace the lands his half-brother squandered away in their war. Other nations that want to be empires are restricted in one way or another. Harath, land of the Aranea, view their neighbors as weak. They've even annexed a few of them, but their nation has literally been slapped down by immortals for tampering with the neighbors. There's multiple baronies on the Red Coast that would love to reunite the fractured land under their own supposedly benevolent rule, but the problem is no one barony is powerful enough to conquer the other 8, and none of them would trust each other enough to form an alliance. Starting an invasion of your neighbor to add them to your own borders is a great way to get ganged up on and split up between the other 8 baronies. So everybody in the Savage baronies has to play nice. That's the state of empires in Mystara and possible future conquests. The biggest targets are Devania and Skothar, but that requires more information to be written about those continents. That part is left up to you unless official Mystara stuff suddenly gets written again, which is a task I'm willing to take with a heavy heart, knowing the expectations that you would lay on me, because this isn't Forgotten Realms with its world-shattering apocalypse of the week, or Dark Sun, which already starts messed up, and you really can't do anything about that. It's a burden I would willingly bear. Next week, entering the voting options is Sports of Mystara. If you have suggestions for future topics, let me know. I've got enough material for at least another 6 months, and I'm always taking requests. But until next week, remember, never get into a land war in Asia.